This is Alcohol Freedom Finders. This week we talk to Caroline Sherlock, a nutritional therapist, a functional medicine practitioner, and a lecturer on genetics and nutrigenomics. So Caroline, as Liam Neeson once said, has a very particular set of skills, acquired over a long career. And it was actually this that made her own drinking feel progressively out of alignment with who she was professionally, as well as who she wanted to be as a mother. Her particular set of skills did initially make her an expert in mitigating the effects of alcohol on the body. She used all manner of biohacks to avoid hangovers, but ultimately she realised that this same deep knowledge could be instrumental in helping her find alcohol freedom. And talk about becoming a fellow alcohol freedom finder, she's even started her own coaching business called Alcohol Freedom Coaching. So let's dive in and hear all about it from Caroline.
Wow. I'm super excited to have Caroline Sherlock with us today. She is a fellow This Naked Mind coach and also an incredible functional medicine practitioner. So we're really excited how Caroline's going to bring together both freedom from alcohol and the health aspect as well. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm really excited to be talking to you both.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you, Caroline. So why don't you take us back to when you decided for yourself you needed to make a change with your relationship to alcohol?
Sure. So this was something that I had been contemplating for a while, and it really came to a head, as with, I think, many of us during the pandemic, which I found super stressful, as did most of us. And I had been questioning my relationship with alcohol for a while. I had used alcohol for years in terms of just switching off at the end of the day, didn't really see it as a particular problem, never had hangovers, never really felt drunk, to be honest, with what I was doing, got up, very high functioning. And it wasn't really a problem in my mind until I started to question my relationship when I wasn't really able to take a break from it successfully. That lasted really for more than, honestly, kind of 4 or 5 days. I think the maximum I managed to do was 10 or 11, which seems utterly ridiculous. So I started to have that cognitive dissonance come in, whereby I was just thinking, what am I doing here? And I've been a functional medicine practitioner, a nutritionist for kind of 20 years now. And I do a lot with genetics and nutrigenomics and lecture and teach on it. And I have my own client base, obviously. And I knew that my genes were not good at the end of the day in terms of being able to detox. And I knew, I'd become an expert basically on, I guess, alcohol and detox and how it was metabolized. I knew everything. So I was biohacking everything. I was using the supplements. I was using the diet. I, was a personal trainer before I got into nutrition as well. I was doing everything right. There was a lot of biohacking going along, which was quite ridiculous when actually the solution, to be honest, was just stop drinking. But I was putting it all in, but I kept looking at my genes, and there's a particular little gene called around the glutathione family, which is how we detox. And my glutathione genes are terrible. And there's this kind of nagging thought at the back of my head that this is going to catch up with me one day. I tell my clients you can't outrun a bad diet. And I was thinking, what am I doing? Because my genes are not going to be so forgiving, as I go forward like this. So that really had been there for a while. And the second thing was that my daughter had some health challenges, and I decided at that point I wanted to be 100% present for her and available whatever time of day or night. And if I was drinking at all, I didn't feel that I was as switched on, obviously, as I should be. And that might have been 11 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning. So that didn't sit well with me. And then the final thing was I decided that I just really wanted to be an inspiration, as we all do, for our kids and a good role model. And this was kind of the final, I think, nail in the coffin for me, because I decided that I was not showing them the strong kind of female lead that I thought I was doing, because I was effectively dealing with stress with alcohol in the evening and turning to a glass of wine, which I did not feel was a good role model for my kids. And I'd grown up around alcohol. It was kind of what I believed was okay. And I got to the point where I thought these three things came together so much, and I just thought it's not okay anymore. I need to do something about it. And I found it hard to stop, quite honestly. And we were in the pandemic. There was always a reason, wasn't there, to another stressful day, something else happened. And I had heard Annie Grace actually talk on a conference, on an addiction conference that I was on a few years back with a doctor in the States. And I'd really resonated with her and her methodology. I really liked what she said. So I refound her, basically, and This Naked Mind. And everything started from there at that point. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot there. I think what struck me most there is the fact that, you were very much a normal functioning person. And I love the idea about, you had all the biohacks. And I think our audience is going to be not so much interested in the biohacks for drinking, but now all of your biohacks around how to recover from having drunk so much. But we'll come on to that in a bit, I'm sure. What I'm really curious about is if you tried so many times and you only managed 4 or 5 and a max of 11 days of not drinking, what about the methodology really made the change for you? What sunk in?
It was really the emphasis on it's not your fault and the compassion, because if I was utterly convinced I didn't want to be labeled. Also, in the health world, the health and wellness world, there is a lot of drinking that goes on, that people don't talk about. But there is a lot of self-judgment, self-criticism, I think, around that as well. And I really liked Annie's approach to you have to have this self-love and compassion for yourself, which I had never really viewed at all in that way before. So that really worked for me. And also questioning all the stories. This is what we do. We deconstruct everything, don't we? And the beliefs that we have and that we hold. And I had these deep ingrained beliefs that, that everything actually required alcohol, and maybe that was me telling myself that story, but a lot of that came from maybe a long time ago. And really, at the end of the day, it's a reward, it's a treat, it's how you switch off. Or you go to anything, you go to a concert, you go to the theatre, and you have a drink, it's this constant beliefs and this is what it's doing for me. And I think what really resonated with the methodology was taking apart that and looking at it from a really objective point of view, because I knew the science, I knew what happens with the blood sugar. I know, what happens in terms of the damage, but I didn't want to hear that, and no one does, do they? When you're in it, you don't want to read something, you don't want to be lectured to, you don't want to hear that it's bad for you. Of course we know it's bad for you. And so what I really liked was that methodology of let's just step back from what we're feeling, the emotions around it. What actually is the feeling that I'm experiencing when I want to pick up this drink? Is it because I actually want what's in it? Or is it because I feel, lonely or bored? Or that I feel that I need some sort of a reward for what's just happened? So, I liked that ability to do that, and the detached kind of let's step back from it and explore and let's get curious about it. And it's an experiment. I had no intention ever of giving up alcohol permanently. Mm. If someone had said to me, and this is the thing, someone had said to me, you're going to give it up, I'd be like, no, there's absolutely no way. And even so I was successful on my 4th alcohol experiment for a variety of different reasons. But even then, I went into it just with this, I just want to take a break. I want to prove to myself that I can take a break. I don't want to give it up. It was a 10-day break I was intending. 10 days, that was all I felt genuinely I could achieve. And then I thought if I got to 2 weeks, great, that's excellent. And it just continued, and I felt so good from what I was doing. That's what happened. But if you'd said to me at the beginning, you're going to give it up, I wouldn't have even started it, because that was not even an option, as I think is for a lot of people, Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I think when I stopped, I don't think I'd gone more than 2 or 3 days without a drink for as long as I could remember. And I think, Justine often says that we're auto-enrolled into a society that where drinking is everything. Drinking is, what you do when you're not working, and or when you're together with people, when you're as you said, all those occasions, they are an occasion to drink, and it goes hand in hand with all these things. And to try and step away and see it not as the sort of answer to all your desires and soothing and all the things that it pretends to give you is very, very difficult. So how, what was the sort of, in that fourth, did you say fourth time that you did the experiment, that it was the lucky one? What was it that in that, the end of that, what was it that sort of made you think, oh, well, actually now I could go longer than 10 days, or I could do this for the foreseeable future?
So that fourth time, I feel it wasn't luck, it was planning with that. And I stepped back. I approached it with kind of military precision, because I thought, if I do this properly, and then if I still fail at it, which is how I was thinking at the time, I thought, I don't know what I'll do next. So I kind of set myself up to not fail. And I took into account how I was going to feel, what I was going to do with that first week. So the coaching for me was just instrumental. And then I layered on what I do in my functional medicine clinic. And I knew that my sleep was probably going to be terrible, because when I had tried that before, and I think this is what people don't tell you either, you try and give it up. Everyone's like, oh no, you sleep so much better, you feel so much better. And the reality is, for many of us, actually, no, it gets worse. It's rough, if you have been having a glass of wine at the end of the day for, however long. So I looked at all of these things, and I planned, and I did biohack my way around sleep, around how I was going to feel, and also what I was going to do. And really thought this time about, well, what am I going to do on a Friday night or Saturday night? Because for as long as I could remember, my Friday and Saturday nights had a glass of wine, or more in them. So it was really that, who am I? What is my identity? And I remember distinctly getting into the end of that first week, and Saturday morning just thinking, I'm up early. I actually feel good, And I think the changing thing was that with this particular time was that I'd got it right. I actually felt good. I didn't feel terrible through that whole week and beyond. And I did feel better and better and better. And as you know what happens, you get your self-respect back through doing that. You think, actually, I can do this. I've done it. And then that just is a rolling stone for wanting to do more and keeping going with it. And it was never I'm going to get to 3 months, I'm going to get to, there was never a time frame. It was just, for today, let's just see if we can get to the next weekend. And I think, where I'd always fallen before was on those weekends, the Friday. That was why it was a kind of 10 days, or 4 or 5 days. You'd start on a Monday or a Sunday, get to the Friday, Saturday, and then it would go wrong. And I think the more that you repeat that action and you realize you can get through it, and actually it's okay, and actually you feel great for doing it, you keep going with it. And I think this time the productivity, and this is what you gain, you talk about what you gain through doing it, the productivity that you can feel and the time that you get back is huge, So like our business that month, our existing business, just flew through the roof. I haven't seen that.
Totally agree with you. I think, this big move that I've done from London to New Zealand, there is no way I would have been able to, pack up a house, move the house, do all the planning. I did it. My husband was working full time. So it was down to me with military precision over a 2-year period, to move our whole lives into New Zealand, checking out schools, the whole lot. That was massive. Yeah. And I can safely say I was not stressed, and I did not get sick during the process. There was a couple of pinch points where I was like, whoa, this is a lot. But I genuinely believe that we do get so much more of our productivity back. The three
Yeah.
things that you just said to me that have really stood out that I think people will be really helpful for them is it's number one, the compassion piece, coming at it with such compassion. And like, even if you do have a little drink midweek and you go, oh no, it's day one again. It's not day
Yeah.
one again with this work. It's just information. You carry
Yeah.
on, you're still on your journey. The second part is planning. And I think for all of us that have failed with that Friday night, and so many of us has, plan the hell out of it. If that means you don't go out for the first couple of Fridays, if that means that you plan a movie night, if that means that you get in really expensive alcohol-free products and chocolate, it doesn't matter. Planning is key to get over those first few firsts of doing things without alcohol. And then the last piece, which I do want you to talk more about because no one else has spoken about this, is where I want to know your top biohacks when you were in that first month, so that people can who aren't still going to come and, well, they can come and see you, give them those details. But as a starting point, what's really going to help them in that first couple of weeks?
So this is what I think is key, and this is what made the difference for me, and there's some people, there's some people that can just give up alcohol like that, and that's fine. There's no issue. There's some people that can just work on the emotions and the coaching, and that's fine. For me, I needed more. So I approached it with sleep. I knew my sleep was going to be disrupted, so I allowed for that. But also I looked at some of the sleep pathways, so how we produce melatonin, for instance, a lot of the calming herbs that we use that help to promote sleep, and I put those in for myself. So I would have magnesium in the evenings, and there's a particular form of magnesium that you can use that actually promotes sleep, so it's not just any old magnesium. So I did all this, and I had the kind of calming herbs in. So I did everything that I could around the sleep. So I think sleep is key, because as soon as your sleep's off, if you don't, and if you're working, if you're high functioning, if you've got stuff to do, even if it's just take kids to school, but if you're running a business as well, you can't afford to not have sleep, in that first week. So that was really important to me. The second thing was making sure that my diet was on track with blood sugar, because when we drink, our blood sugar regulation is off. And so by feeding your body with adequate protein, replenishing the nutrients that we would lose through drinking, and particularly the B vitamins, which are very involved with energy production, chromium that helps to balance blood sugar. There's lots and lots of these different nutrients that you can get in a multivitamin, but I particularly focused on them. And also knowing my genetics, I kind of put in more of some of these, particularly where I knew that my pathways were going to be compromised. And I also supported my liver, so with some of the more detox-friendly foods. So I really planned the diet, and I really think that was key, because if you try to give up, and if you do not have adequate protein in, if you end up eating kind of bowls of pasta and cereal or just kind of toast because you don't really know what you're doing, your blood sugar's all over the place, and it's going to make you feel terrible, So you're kind of setting yourself a little bit up for failure there if you haven't got that base diet. And I think the third thing with me was I understood the neurotransmitter pathways. So when we say neurotransmitters, it's all the chemicals that make us feel good. So like serotonin makes us feel happy, GABA helps us to relax, and dopamine's kind of the really well-known one with alcohol. But actually focusing on pathways that help us relax. So GABA, for instance, it's very clever what alcohol does. It latches on to the GABA receptor in the body. So we don't need to then produce our own GABA. And GABA is your chill out, relax. It's our kind of natural sedative, basically. So when you're having alcohol in, that latches onto it. But when you take the alcohol out, your body's kind of going, where is that? What's happening? So you've got this heightened sense of anxiety. So actually what we want to do during that first week is really promote that relaxation so that you don't have as much anxiety, feel the stress. And, on the converse side, you've got this little thing called glutamate, and alcohol excites that. It makes us have more more glutamate. And again, when you take the alcohol out, you get this rebound effect. So you've kind of got more anxiety, excitement, and there's lots of foods that trigger glutamate, so you don't want to be having those foods in the first week because it's going to make you feel more anxious, more stressed. And for many of us, that's the entire reason, in some cases, that people turn to alcohol in the first place, is to reset these neurotransmitters by kind of the only tool that we know how at that time. And alcohol does that very successfully. It plays around with that balance, but then of course has these rebound effects and leaves us feeling worse. So if we know that, you can get through those first 2 weeks make it a little bit easier, which then sets up your chances of continuing, and continuing to go without alcohol for longer. I think it gives people more of a chance of success. And it's certainly what made the difference for me, really, kind of using the supplements and for want of a better word, biohacking these pathways. But it was particularly sleep, blood sugar, and the neurotransmitters that I focused on. And it really was a winning combination. And that's what I, really focus on with clients. It gives you a better chance of winning with this and succeeding during those first few weeks. And I do think, as if you get through those first 2 weeks, most people can get to kind of 21 days or 28 days, and that might be all they want to do, and that's fine, But there is that momentum once you start, going with it. And, that's where it gets interesting, because a lot of these nutrient deficiencies don't just self-resolve in kind of a couple of days. Some of them are 1 week, 2 weeks, some of them are 3 months, and some areas are, kind of up to a year, to actually rebound. So by working on those and continuing to incorporate it, that's where it can be really interesting, because you're working with your own physiology and biochemistry with it at the same time as taking apart all these beliefs that we've held for so long, and rebalancing everything.
Yeah, I mean, that was, for me, the most powerful part of changing my relationship with alcohol, was to see it differently, to understand the science, to understand that the way the neurotransmitters work, and the rebound, as you call it, that idea that I initially I drank because it was fun. I drank to have fun, and it was fun for a long time. It was fun, and then you get responsibilities, your life changes, you're not out with friends as often, and you end up I ended up drinking more than I should have been, or more than I wanted to, planned to, at home. And it became a sort of thing that you had more responsibility, you had a mortgage, you had a job responsibilities, and I was looking back, I realized I was drinking because I was stressed. I was drinking because I was feeling under pressure, and knowing now that actually it was sort of chicken and egg thing, really, because the alcohol, like you said, with the rebound, it boosts all those feelings of stress. As you said, that your relaxation receptors, the GABA receptors, are either closed, or I don't know exactly how that works, but they're not functioning in the same way that they would be, and so you are left in a sort of situation where you're being flooded with cortisol and all the sort of stress hormones, trying to fight off the alcohol sedation effect, and those last they last the whole day the next day, and so it's you never quite get back to a regular baseline, because your body's thinking, well, I'm not going to bother giving you those the happy hormones to a normal base level, because you're gonna flood me with alcohol, which is going to set everything tip everything the wrong direction. And so understanding that and thinking, oh gosh, so what I thought of as a solution was actually part of the problem, was a real mind blower. But sugar, that one I really didn't expect, and because I sort of thought, I don't drink cocktails, and I just drink wine and maybe the odd beer, and so I thought, well, I mean, I'm interested. So you say that it actually messes with your whole sort of glucose system, rather. It's not so much that alcohol or wine is full of sugar. It's just that it messes with, or is it both, that it messes with the system as well?
It's both. So it depends what you're drinking, but yes, for sure. So alcohol raises the blood glucose level very, very, very quickly. And the problem is that it's the compound, when it's broken down, it's the acetaldehyde, which some people don't break down particularly well, but that's very, very damaging to the cells. And so this is why when we, people who drink, are at more risk of diabetes and blood sugar dysregulation, because the insulin, the receptors on the cells just don't work as well because they become damaged over time. And you might not see that immediately, but it just sits there in the background until it gets to the point where your body can't actually handle the glucose, very well at all. So yes, that blood sugar dysregulation is there. And the other reason is, your sleep is disrupted significantly, the REM sleep. And sleep is just when we detox, when we sort everything out. But sleep is highly linked to that gut microbiome as well, which regulates sugar levels. And, if you think about it logically, anything that we eat or drink goes through the digestive system. And we know that alcohol really affects the gut microbiome. It makes the gut leaky, and it makes it much harder for our body to just regulate, how we're feeling. And if you have not got, appropriate levels of the other neurotransmitters of serotonin, if your dopamine's all over the place, because we're, looking for that drink, that reward at the end of the day, if your GABA's off as well, and many of the others, you become reliant on that, I guess, that alcohol coming in, just that little burst of energy, that little kind of mood upregulation as well.
What I love what you're talking about here is it's like this whole, it compounds the idea that it's not our fault. So we know through Annie Grace's work, it's alcohol's fault, not ours. But what you're talking about, which is what I deeply love, is that actually what's happening to us biochemically means that we may have a predisposition not to cope with alcohol well, but moreover, when we're trying to recover or from a day-to-day drinking, that our bodies actually needs the alcohol just to feel it's more self again. Look, we're running out of time, Caroline, and I'm really keen to hear how you answer our last question, which is 3 words or many more. What biggest sort of takeaway about being an alcohol freedom finder?
3 words. So, freedom, obviously, but everyone says freedom, so I'm not gonna do that one. But my first is gratitude, and I feel hugely, immensely grateful that I have not got alcohol in my life anymore. I could not be happier that for my second half, of my life, that it feels like a gift that I have a second chance. So I am so grateful to have found Annie Grace and the community, and also be able to do the work that I do and have the background that I do to have done this. So that would be the first one, gratitude. Second one is alignment for me, because I really feel that, I've always been very open. I share whatever, I talk about whatever, and what you get is what you see with me, and I really feel so aligned that I am, 100% genuinely walking my talk now. There is, no hiding anything, and that makes a huge difference. Okay, so alignment. And I think the third thing would be, I feel it has given me this sense of mission and drive, in that, this is really what I want to do now. And I think it's a very underrepresented area, because it's not just that first 1 month, 2 months, 3 months that we need to focus on. There is a whole lifetime ahead of us where we can change the trajectory of our lives and all of the things that are associated with drinking alcohol, whether or not it is raised risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, diabetes, liver cancer, all of these things. We can influence, our ability to deal with them by upregulating certain pathways, and mental health as well, or hormones, all of these things that alcohol disrupts, including liver function and thyroid function and sex hormones, and the neurotransmitters. We can affect all of those, and we can positively influence our ability to live long and healthy to, I'm aiming for 100 or more, and I think once you have given up alcohol, I don't want to be taken down by any of this stuff. We've done the hard work, and I don't think it's acceptable to just kind of sit here. I want to make sure that my cells are working properly. I want to make sure that my cognitive function is there till old age, and so that none of the drinking that I did is going to affect that as far as I'm concerned. So I'm very driven to share that with as many people as I can. It's kind of not just give it up and okay, we're done. It's okay, what about the damage that has been done? And how can we mitigate that? And actually, how can we make our lives and our health better than, even if we hadn't done that drinking before? And there's ways to do that. And that's what I'm really passionate about now. So driven would absolutely be my last word there.
That's brilliant. And I think there'll be a lot of people who want to know more and want you to help them. So where can they find you?
So they can find me on my website, which is alcoholfreedomcoaching.com, and go there and just, connect with me and find out more.
Thanks so much
Brilliant.
for being with us, Caroline. I mean, I just love the depth of knowledge that you have. And I have actually worked with Caroline in a previous life as a functional health practitioner, and I can't recommend her compassion, knowledge. Yeah, she's a font of information and kindness. So do reach out to Caroline.
Oh, thank you, Justine.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you both. It's been so good talking to you.